Hi, everyone. I'm Raga De Silva, your host for Older Queer Voices podcast. Today on Older Queer Voices, we'll be talking about aging while trans, the truth we don't talk. We are honored to welcome Jacqui Gavin, a remarkable woman whose life and work have shaped conversations on trans equality across the UK. Jacqui is a trailblazer, a powerful advocate, and someone who has spoken courageously about the realities of living openly as a trans woman. As a LGBTQ plus community's age, we are entering new territory, one filled with hope, fears, systemic gaps, and deeply personal questions. What does it mean to grow older as a trans person in the UK today? What does dignity look like in later life? How do we protect identity, autonomy, and respect in systems that don't always understand us? Jacqui brings lived experience, insight, and wisdom to this conversation. And today, we'll explore her journey, the past that shaped her, the advocacy that drives her, and her hopes and concerns for the future as trans people navigate aging, vulnerability, and the healthcare system. Please join me in welcoming Jacqui Gavin.
Thank you very much, Raga. Great to be here.
Jackie, so lovely to have you as a guest. Really, I've been following you on LinkedIn forever, and I've heard you speak once, and I am really feel honored that you agreed to be on a podcast. So before we explore, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, well, to me, the honor is mine, Raga, because for having me a part of this show is just a real joy for me and a real privilege. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So before we explore the big themes around aging, identity, and the future, we want to begin simply with you, Jackie, your story, your journey, and the person behind the advocacy. So I'm just for the listeners who are listening for the first time, would you introduce yourself? What feels important for people to know about who you are, both as a woman and as a trans advocate?
That's a multi-million dollar question, I guess. But as I say, and I said before, thank you so much. And if I were to introduce myself to, I suppose, the world for the first time, I would begin by saying that my name is Jacqui Gavin and that I am a woman whose life has been shaped by a journey that has required far more courage and far more resilience, with a little bit of humour and a little bit of patience than I ever believed I possessed. I also believe that I am someone who has had to rebuild myself more times than I care to think about or acknowledge, and yet has always been found a way of keep moving forward through the ups, the downs, or sometimes, as we call it, the good and the bad and the ugly times of life.
Yeah, that's Jackie. I just want to just touch upon what you said about you having to rebuild your life over and over again. I want to understand why did you have to rebuild several times?
I mean, people talk about when from a trans perspective, if I can put it in that kind of way, that we have to go through a process and we go through various different kind of stages. But trans isn't just about changing one's gender. It's about understanding that whatever life throws at us, things can happen, issues happen. So for me personally, yes, my gender transition at a very young age. I mean, I was only 20 years old when I went through the physicality of the gender transition process, but also other transitions that happened in my life. Losing my mother just a few years later, she died at a tender age of 52 years old, so younger than I am these days. Also, having to move from job to job to job. As somebody who has experienced what I have in my lived experience, because people didn't understand it, didn't want to understand it, were a bit more closed off. I found myself having to go from job to job to job for a long time. And it's what I call, and you've heard me say it, Raga, my patchwork quilt part of my career, where I went from job to job before I joined the UK civil service and finding a bit of peace and a bit of stability. But it's always that constant on the move and having to change and change and change. And now being able to, at 58, 59 years old, and thinking, I've found that peace. I've found where I'm supposed to be.
Jackie, I'm really very sorry to hear about your mom and all the challenges you faced because It is very hard for us also. For me, as a trans ally, I meet so many others in the community, and there is this theme is so common. This narrative, even when I went to Spain for a festival called the Ella International Lesbian Festival recently, even at that festival, one of the speakers there, she absolutely touched my heart because she found a job which was perfect for her in the finance industry, and she could only work half a day. The same evening, she was asked to leave her job. And yeah, and she didn't do anything about it because she felt shame.
Yeah.
And it is very, heartbreaking actually to hear these things. And it is a story that I hope stops here at some point and doesn't get repeated for the new generation, for the next generation.
Yeah.
But, you know, uh, Jackie, one of the things that I really want to know, I want to take you back, and it may be a bit difficult for you. But I read in your LinkedIn about 30 years ago when you got married,
Yeah.
the media went right after you. So do you want to just share a bit about it with our listeners?
So yes, as you say, 30 years ago, this year, in fact, I got married to my then husband, in what we were told was a legal ceremony, a ceremony that would allow us to be legally married in law, etc., etc., in a country which was associated or is associated with UK law. We got married in Barbados, on the small Caribbean island of Barbados, where we were told it was legal. It wasn't. It was never ever legal because it was prior to any kind of legislation anywhere in the world, particularly for same sex couples, because we would have been seen as a same sex couple. Even though I had gone through gender transition, there still wasn't the gender recognition process, Recognition Act had not been passed in the UK. Even the Sex Discrimination Act had not been updated with the gender reassignment regs. But me and Steve, we got married on that understanding that it was going to be a legal wedding. But after we had the celebration, had our family round with us, etc., we got back to the UK. And I still remember walking through the doors at Gatwick Airport and being met with what I call a barrage of flashbulbs, where it felt like every single piece of, I suppose, journalism was there to try and understand what it was that we had gone through. And then after that, when we got back home, we thought, right, at least we've got home, we can close the door and shut the world away from us. But that didn't stop them. They still came knocking. As I described it on a other conversation recently, they kicked my door in to be basically say, we're coming for you and we're going to report on you. And then after they did that, we found ourselves on the front page of very many of the very many of the newspapers, whether it be the broadsheets or the other papers. We also found ourselves subject to articles on the news, whether it be the national news or the local news. We even got a phone call from what was then the Big Breakfast, if you remember the Big Breakfast on Channel 4, where we were being invited onto the bed with Lily, as in Lily Savage, to talk about our experience. I was willing to do that. However, my ex-husband wasn't prepared to do that. My ex-husband was a very, very private man, and he found it incredibly hard. He probably found it harder than I did. Whereas I wanted to just say, look, I've got a story to tell. I've got to let people know this is the experience, what people experience sometimes. But he was like, no, not going to happen, not going to happen on my watch. And so I went underground and started dealing with the issues underground.
So what did the media want from you?
The media back in the day, I mean, a bit like where we are today in some ways, but more so in a case of it was about sensationalizing it. Gender bender, whatever you want to call it, sex change was the headline, all those kind of things. And it was very much based on the fact that they were trying to sensationalize it, is the best way I can describe it, Raga. I mean, in all ways, because being somebody who's experienced gender transitioned back in the day, it was a very, very rare thing. It wasn't like today where we see more visibility, we see more issues out there in the media, more conversations around this. This was something that was very much hidden, and it was sensationalized whenever it happened. So there are so many names that I could bring to the surface here, but it was just about how do we literally tear a strip off somebody. We seem to have this favoritism that we love to do in the UK. We love to be able to tear somebody down because they're different rather than because of who they are and what they bring to the world.
Yeah, we need to celebrate more, isn't it? So I'm just trying to understand 30 years ago as a trans woman living in a world where obviously it was extremely challenging. How were people looking at you? This is the media trying to create sensationalization, right? But how was the reaction, say, from your family, your friends, your extended neighbors, just the general public? What did you feel? Was it very different to how it is today?
So back in the day, I would describe what I've gone through is a process. It was never about an identity. It was never about saying, I'm becoming trans. It was about, and I hate to use this word, and some people possibly may shoot me down for this, but it was about transsexualism, a journey from A to Z or Z to A, whichever way you want to look at it. As somebody who was born male, went through the process, the medical process, and all the kind of psychiatric help, etc., where a psychiatrist signed you off to say that you're mad enough and crazy enough, but sane enough to want to be able to change your body to look a different way. My family found it very difficult. There is no denying that. There was huge challenges for my family. They are aware of an era, if I can put it in that kind of way, and also, as you can tell by my exhausted tones, from this up there in north in Scotland, was something that was very unusual, very, very challenging to society in that community. So they very much shunned me away for a long period of time. And I understood it. I had to do what I had to do from my perspective to protect me, and I had to also protect them. So we did it, but then once I'd gone through the gender transition after a couple of years, and then they saw me for the first time, they went, actually, he doesn't look as scary as what we thought he was going to do. And I do say the word he, because they were still thinking of me as he back in that time. And actually, she looks presentable. We can walk down the street without people pointing the finger. However, when the media did what they did, first time when I was doing some modeling for some of the big brands, and of course the media had run a headline before those headlines from when I got married, which included a headline which read something like, "You're a bit of all right, Jack." Yes, we did say Jack. It's a man. I'd already experienced that, and so I'd built up that resilience within me, whereas, and my family, again, when that happened, found it very, very difficult and were pointing the finger of blame at me for it happening. And I'm like, all I've done is just try to live my life. But that's not the way they saw it. As fast forward to where we are today, there are different sort of things about it. I think it's very different, as I say, because it was a process that I went through, whereas now people are wearing it as an identity piece. It's almost like we're inviting in a reaction from the media from within sometimes, that you will respect me, you will acknowledge me that I am trans. Whereas I just want to say, why can't you just be whatever your name is? In my case, I'm Jacqui. How do you do? I just want to get on with my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I'm just thinking, going back 30 years again, I'm thinking, wow, huge responsibility on young shoulders, right? And this is where I celebrate older queer voices, because we don't even understand how hard it was, how difficult it was 30 years ago. And people who've been on a journey from that time to now, I think it has changed so much. I've seen the landscape change myself. So I'm just going to ask you a very simple question, looking back over your life and the journey as a trans woman, which you just shared. So was there a turning point in your life, or were there multiple turning points in your life?
I look at my life and think there's been many, many turning points, but the main sort of turning point, I would say, from a career perspective, certainly, was when I joined the UK Civil Service. The UK Civil Service was one of those kind of organisations that was in itself going through transition, if I can put it in that kind of wording, because particularly on the lead up to 2010, when we obviously had the Equality Act coming into the UK, into legislation, even the civil service said, hang on a minute, we need to do something, and we need to do something that allows us to be able to be more in tune with the legislation, but also in tune with what's happening across our society. And literally within weeks of starting that job, I was pigeonholed into leading, particularly for the Department for Work and Pensions, a lot of issues pertaining to gender identity or gender reassignment as the characteristic is in legislation, and how do we build an understanding of that. Now, bearing in mind the Department for Work and Pensions back in 2009, 2008-9 was about 120,000 people were working for that department. By far the largest department anywhere in UK civil service. And how do we get people to understand in job centres, benefit centres, that people have this kind of lived experience? Because the one thing that always, always, always gives it away that you've gone through this kind of experience is your national insurance number. You read out your national insurance number at a job centre or whatever, and people go, your national, it doesn't, computer says no, so for better tone of a phrase. So we had to educate people to better understand that people go through this. Yes, there's special section D, they're a specific area of the Department for Work and Pensions and HMRC that deal with people who go through this process. Prior to gender recognition, prior to all of those kind of things, but it was giving those kind of education. And then from taking that experience in the Department for Work and Pensions and then becoming part of the cross-civil service network that dealt with these kind of issues right across government and trying to get every part of government, not just here in the UK, but across the 169 consulates in the world, to get people to understand what it means for people of my experience, and also intersex individuals. And then by the time I left, we were then moving into how do we understand the non-binary issue, the genderqueer issue, et cetera, because we've seen that explosion, particularly in the last 10 years.
Now, I agree with you. I think we need more conversations around intersex. You hardly even hear about it. And definitely non-binary, who are completely like sidelined. But, thank you. I just want to know, how long did you work with the civil services? Like, how much was the experience?
So it was about 12 years I was in the civil service, all told. 12 years of the best time of my life before I decided to take a career break. And during that career break, I went into various different sectors, including the corporate agenda, the charity sector, local government, all of those kind of things. But my heart still wanes for getting back to the centre of the government, because I loved my time down in Whitehall. It was probably a time that I just hold on to with real positivity, a real sort of opportunity to make a difference is the best way I can describe it. And that's what gets me up in the morning, is making a difference to people's lives.
How wonderful, Jacqui. So we're going to come back to the health system and the whole concept, let's say, of aging. So do you think about, I know you said you're in your late 50s, so we are there right now, we are aging. And I think you're aging beautifully, if I may say so.
Thank you.
Have you ever, worried about or have concerns about aging, as a trans woman?
The only thing I'm worried about right now is, where are we going in terms of following the Supreme Court ruling in the spring? What does that actually now mean? I mean, for me personally, I read the legislation as it was written and what it was written for, and don't see any real difference. But it's the way it's interpreted is the key thing here, because people will say, but you are trans, and I'm like, no, I am female with a trans experience. And this is where I think part of the whole sort of debate needs to come out, and done in a respectful and honest way, to understand that there is different kinds of experiences under the trans umbrella. And that is the thing that worries me, that we seem to be throwing everything that looks a little bit different or presents itself in a different way under one umbrella without best explaining that kind of experiences. Because does that mean that if I fall ill tomorrow, for example, and I'm taken into a hospital, how am I going to be treated? How am I going to be respected? I've always had a nervousness around me ever since my gender transition all those years ago, nearly 40 years ago now, that whenever I go into a female space, i.e. a toilet or a changing room, whatever, I get the cold sweats on me, still to this day, even after all this time. But even more so now, because if somebody recognizes me, because as you said right at the beginning, Raga, there is no hiding place for me on the media. You just type into Google and boom, there's a whole host of things come back about me. And if somebody recognizes me in a changing room in Cambridge here, the town where I live, then what does that do for me if somebody goes, you can't be here? Well, hang on a minute. I've gone through a process to allow me to live this way, in a way that I'm not causing any harm to anybody. I'm just existing in society. And the world we live in today is so polarized, so divided, and we seem to be full of hate at every single corner. And we need to find a way to regroup and realize at the end of the day, whether it be you, Raga, whether it be me, we're all simply human trying to exist in a world that's, well, not the world, but the people of the world are in a little bit of a mess at the moment.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Jacqui, I just want to give you a slight anecdote about my own partner. I mean, I identify as a lesbian. She does as well. 5 years ago, she had a brain injury. She had to be, during COVID times, during lockdown, she had to be wheeled into the emergency. And in the middle of that, the first thing that they asked her is, should we call your husband or your boyfriend? Just making an assumption. And in that moment, she said this to me repeatedly and on several other shows as well, that in that moment she froze. She didn't know whether it was safe enough to come out. What if? That was the question going on in her mind. And when I think about that kind of an experience, and I think about what you've just said to me, and I've heard about this from, again, several others, that you still, feel, I'm going to use the word fear when you go into these spaces. And that fear, if a lesbian can feel, when that's one part of the fear, I can just not imagine as a trans woman what you have to be through, what you have to go through. So Jacqui, go on.
Sorry.
No, sorry. I just wanted to ask, from a healthcare perspective, have you ever in the last 30 years used the healthcare system? We'll come to aging as well, and have had to deal with this.
I count my blessings in so many ways. I've never really had a problem. In fact, so much so that my local GP in my village, the village where I live, even phoned me up once just after we moved here 7-8 years ago. And she said, I've been going through your notes, Jacqui, and I know your history, and I know the details around it, but I want to make sure you get the best treatment and the treatment that's right for you. And I'm like, go on. She said, so there is lots of things with the male marker, but obviously you've gone through everything that you want to do, and we want to make sure you get treated as female. I said, well, that's very kind. Yes, I absolutely see that I should be treated with the dignity and respect of a female, absolutely, without a doubt. However, I still have the genetic makeup of a male. I can't escape that. I can't change any of that whatsoever. I still have a prostate. I still have all of those things. And if I end up, say, in the medical system with prostate cancer, highly unlikely because of the hormones I take, but if I did, then I would want the medical profession to know how to give me the best treatment that they can. But to your question, definitely, I have never once had any real issues whatsoever that I can, fingers crossed, touching wood, etc., etc. I cannot remember any time really having a difficult time. Correction, one time when I had a migraine, and I'm a really bad migraine sufferer, I was rushed into the local hospital and they were like, what do we do? And the doctor came in, this was prior to my local GP doing what they did, said, and how do we treat you, sir? And then as soon as he saw me, he went, oops. He recognized that he was in the wrong. He said, nope, sorry, my bad. Let me treat you as I need to treat you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Many older people, trans people we talk to, fear being misgendered or dead named. And I've heard horror stories about that, especially within the care setting or healthcare systems. So, how do these concerns show up for you in your own life? Do you, like I said, you're in your late 50s. Do you ever sit back? And I know you said that you feel the privilege and you feel all right about it. But at some point, we all get older and older. And if we are vulnerable and we are put into a care setting, of maybe we don't have a choice, not of our choice. And how do you think that will show up for you? And how do you worry about it, first of all?
There is no denying there is always a constant nag in the back of your head about it. I'm in a relationship with another trans person as well now, and there is no denying that we both often talk about it. We go through will that actually look like and how will that play out. But I live for the moment, live for the moments right here now, and heaven forbid if there was a number 88 bus was to come down my road, not that it would do because it's a very narrow lane, but if that number 88 bus was to come down here and I was to get knocked down and I would end up having to be in a care system, I feel that the system in the main and most people know that let's just do the right thing. It's the minority on the extremes that are the ones that probably will cause the issue. I think as a society, yes, I talked about the polarization we're seeing at the moment, but I think having seen what we've seen over the last, let's again call it the last 10 years, I think people are starting to wake up and smell the coffee. They've seen what's happening from a US perspective. They've seen even what's happened here in the UK and realizing that this kind of polarization is not helping anybody. We have to, forgive me for saying the word, but normalize things again. And that's where I think we're starting to see the slow get to there. Yes, it's going to be slow and it's going to take time, but I'm hopeful in my heart of hearts that within the next 5 years, we can start to get back to that place where we were just before a little vote that happened in 2016 that nobody likes to acknowledge.
True. That's the truth. Jacqui, I was just thinking, I'm sure you have a little community of friends and your networks where the trans community I'm talking about, you hang out, you have conversations and honest conversations. And if you have friends with the age group that we're now talking about, older queers, what is typically the concerns that they may have?
I think the biggest concern that I'm hearing constantly is what does the future hold? And the Supreme Court ruling, going back to that again, is a massive, massive thing for many of them right now. Where and what does that actually mean for me? And I have to try and say to them, look, the Supreme Court ruling was simply about identifying that the protected characteristic of sex was based on birth sex. Gender reassignment, if you've gone through the physical and the mental process and all of those kind of processes in terms of gender reassignment, you also are still protected in law. Where I think the problem is where we've got to understand the non-binary side, the queer space, the fluid space, the whatever other descriptor is out there, because we haven't yet broken that down. And that's causing even a debate within inside the community itself, because some want to hold on to, well, we've gone through the physicality, others want to hold on to something else, others want to hold on to something else. And I've had to say, look, we've absolutely got to bring everything under this umbrella and break it down in a way that people understand, much in the same way as disability. So under disability, you don't just say somebody is disabled. You want to be a bit, like what you said to me in the beginning, you want to be a bit more curious. So you're disabled. What kind of disability have you got? Is it a visual impairment? Is it a physical impairment? Is it a chronic illness? What is it? And it's the same within the trans umbrella, as it were. You're trans, yes. Have you gone through the physicality? Are you about how you present? Is it more about the clothing rather than the skin? What is it about it? And that's where I think, again, many people are having those debates that are going on, and it's causing people to fall out like I've never ever known before.
On the politics of it, is it? Yeah.
It's not just the politics, but what does it actually mean for me? And how can you see yourself, having gone through the physical processes, being more superior than everybody else? I'm like, I'm not trying to be superior. I'm saying if we want the rest of society to lean into this rather than lean away from it, or be seen to be transphobic or whatever, we have to break it down so that they understand, rather than actually being seen to be transphobic, if that's what you want to describe them as. Is somebody transphobic if they're being curious and asking questions? And Raga, you've asked me so many questions, and I love that. And we need to have more people being prepared to answer the kind of questions. If you don't feel comfortable about it, simply say, I don't feel comfortable about answering that question, and don't take it as somebody being transphobic, because they're not.
Exactly. I've been on panels myself where I've been on panels with trans women or trans men, and often somebody in the audience may ask a very difficult question, a question that may sound offensive. But I always say to people, look at the intentionality. What is the intention behind that?
Yeah.
Don't react. Don't make it difficult for the other person to shut down and not ask these questions, because if we don't have these difficult conversations, the narrative is never going to change.
Absolutely. And this is part of what I'm seeing as well, where part of where we are in the equality world, we've seen a little bit of weaponization.
Yes.
And I say that in the nicest possible way, but because you have a characteristic doesn't give you the permission to make everybody else's life difficult.
Yes.
We have to listen, hear what's being said. We have two of these for a reason and one of these for a reason, as the old adage goes. Let people be curious. Let people ask questions. Let's acknowledge it and just get back to a place where we can have debate and understand at the end of the day, we can still hug each other and say, thank you for that. I needed that.
Yeah, but I do understand why, Jacqui, why some may find it difficult, because you need to feel safe. And I know from meeting and talking to a lot of my trans friends that they have often been in spaces where the intention behind a question has been to cause offense. And so I understand that. So now all I say on my podcast to listeners, that there's something which is available for free. It sounds cliche, and that's called kindness. And
yes.
Yeah, and that's so free. You don't have to pay for it. You just have to be kind. Tune into your empathy, kindness. And that's another word that I use, because even as a lesbian I face this, is the word called dignity. We all need to be given the respect and the dignity that we deserve as humans. We're everything else later. We are humans first. And that's something that I find it hard to understand. I'm going to come back to you on the employment and the job conversation. And I know you said at the beginning of your career, you had to switch multiple jobs. How do you think it is for trans people today? And I'm going to have multiple questions here. How is it, do you think it is for you? I know you run a consultancy and a wonderful consultancy. Happy for you to talk about it. But if you were to remain in employment, there are statistics that say that as you get older, even for a heterosexual person, a woman is treated quite differently to a very experienced man. They're seen as wise, and women are seen as, oh, just bloody menopausal, you know. And so do you think that if you were not in your running your own consultancy, that you would have found it all right to find a job, or you think you would have to go through further discrimination?
I think that's a great question, Raga. And I think the reason I set up my own consultancy was for that exact reason. I was finding that when I was applying for jobs, that I was being told, we've only got about 7 years left out of you. We need to think about long term. And I'm like, I work in diversity, equity and inclusion, or equity, diversity, inclusion, or as I these days call it, culture. And most people who sit in a head of EDI or a director of DEI, as I've done, or chief of culture, most people sit in those roles probably for about 2-3 years, and then they move on to another role because the constant churn that goes on in that space. But certainly I did find that because of my age, I was probably getting overlooked more for certain jobs because of that. Was it because of my trans history? Was it because of that? There possibly could have been part of that. Some jobs that I've done in the past, I felt not supported as much as what I see in other colleagues, if that makes sense. Because again, people unsure about how we talk about it, how we bring it in. And that has been always been a real challenge to me, where people will say the right thing, will do the right thing, but then expect everything from you without giving you the support. And understanding that as somebody who's gone through this kind of experience, sometimes you take a bit of a time, because I'm quite a shy and humble person, despite how confident I may come across when I deliver a keynote or whatever. But in the main, I am a very humble and a very private and shy individual. And it takes a lot of energy for me to come out of myself in so many ways. And that, when you're doing the kind of job that I do, can be very difficult, because most people look at diversity practitioners as people that I would describe as, let's be all jazz hands, let's make a song and dance about it, let's do something here, let's do something here. Whereas I'm like, I want to get to the root cause. I tackle root cause. I'm curious. If there's a hole in the wall, I'm going to go digging to find out what's causing that hole in the wall. So I suppose the short answer is it has been difficult. Whereas in the civil service, I know anywhere I walked within Whitehall, people would go, it's Jacqui. People would know me and would actively go out of their way to find out where they could bring me into the conversation. Whereas now, again, part of the reason I'm at Whitehall is not having that ability to be able to go there, which is, again, my consultancy is about how do we shift the culture? How do we understand the culture? And how do I get myself into that space to go digging in that hole to fix the hole?
Excellent. Jacqui, I'm curious again to understand, does anything make you angry? What gets you like really mad? You know, because you've been around for a long time and having to deal with often, I'm sure, unintended, conversations which are hurtful. So how do you manage that?
I think the thing that angers me most at the moment, Raga, and I am going to be controversial here and say this, is what we are doing to ourselves. That's the whole thing at the moment. I feel that we seem to be expecting that if we say that we've got this kind of lived experience and we create a series of people who we all know as influencers, or as I like to call them, influenzas. Forgive me for saying that, but sometimes it does feel like some of them are just a bad cold. And I say that with the greatest deal of respect and the greatest deal of love in my heart, because it's like, why are you using this as a weapon? We won the wars to get the legislation that we got. If you want to change legislation, you have to first stop, explain what it is you're looking for, and then sometimes realize you've got to go through a negotiation. These days, people have forgotten the art of negotiation, and that angers me a lot, because it's like, I expect, going back to your point about respect, you only get respect because it's earned. You do not get respect because it's given. You have to sometimes work, and that sometimes means you have to take 2 steps forward, followed by 5 steps backward. If it's a direction, it's a step forward, whether it be backward or it's back forward. And when I see what I see, where we're creating role models or individuals who are seen to be the leading voices in this space, or giving them an award or whatever, forgive me sitting here with certificates and all that behind me, but giving them an award simply because of what they say. You don't get anything in life unless you tackle that root cause. So come on, let's get back to that point where we realize we have to work in this way as a negotiation to go forward, rather than this sort of spouting off of hate against hate against hate against hate. Find the love in your heart to go forward.
Oh, that's so beautifully put, Jacqui. Really, so beautifully. Find the love in your heart. There is that again, freely available. I say, use it, because where else will you use it? And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I've got like these little questions, and then as you're talking, I'm thinking, we had a conversation with a solicitor a couple of times on our podcast. With couple of we did 2 episodes because we realized that our community basically has absolutely no idea of the paperwork that we need to put in place. And someone said to me that if you love someone dearly, you will make sure that you have your papers in place so that when you were to go, because we're not going to be here forever, that your loved one is looked after. And I'm going to ask you this question as a trans woman and an older queer trans woman. Have you put your paperwork in place? And is there something that you would like to tell our audience about how important it is to make sure that we do this?
So I would say the vast majority of my paperwork's in place, and I'm looking out of the corner of my eye because I can see a big pile of paperwork in the corner here. I still have to get my will sorted out, and I know it's one thing I absolutely need to do without a shadow of a doubt. Because when you get to this age in life, I mean, we've all been free spirits, let's not forget that. But when you get to this age, you start thinking about these things. I need to make sure that I've got everything in place, because who knows what tomorrow will bring? None of us know what tomorrow brings. And that wise head that we all have. So yes, as females, we also do have wise heads. And we need to get all of those things in a structure, in an order, so that people know what the right things to do. I even wrote my own sort of, what's the wording?
Wish list?
Not so much my wish list, the script for when it's my funeral. I want there to be a script that I want people to do. I don't want people to sit there crying their eyes out. I want them to look back and go, have a laugh, for goodness. I said right at the beginning, a bit of humor. I like laughing a damn sight more than I like crying. A happy tear feels so much better on your cheek than a tear when you're strained and upset and for everything else. So celebrate everything about it and find the joy in the little moments. That is so important as well.
Sure. And just to remind our viewers, while we're here talking about paperwork, wills are important because otherwise, anything that you have, estate, anything, any asset, it will not be given to the person that you want it to be, rightfully theirs. There are two powers of attorneys. One is medical, one is finance. Definitely make sure that that's in place, Jackie, because especially in our situations where it becomes very difficult for us to have any, the doctors, medical, just assume heterosexual boyfriend, husband will come and take, brother will have it, father will have it. So make sure of that. And one of the really tragic things the reason I brought up the paperwork bit, Jackie, is one of the very tragic anecdotes I've heard from some of my trans friends that particularly this particular person, once she was in a care home, trans woman, care home, the care home treated her in her biological
Yeah.
gender, sorry, and she was made to wear clothes as a man. Uh, they called her by their, were a dead name. And when she passed, her family actually had a tombstone with her dead name, and 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 that is tragic, right,
It is.
from every point of view. And that is why one of the main reasons we talk about this on our podcast, saying you put a wish list, you make sure it's very clear which care home you want to go to, because care homes can be transphobic, as we know. And yeah, you make sure that you have the right paperwork in place for your needs, and that your needs are met, because god forbid if we go through Alzheimer's or dementia and we not don't have the mental capacity, then make sure that while you have all the mental capacities in place, you make sure, like, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and how our tomorrow will be is not guaranteed. Sorry, I needed to say that, Jackie, because
Absolutely. Get it.
I've come across several such cases, and it is quite, like I said, heartbreaking and tragic. Now we're coming almost to the end, and I'm like thinking, you talked about awards, and I thought, what about your British Empire Medal? Please tell us more about that, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. I mean, my British Empire Medal I got for my services, mainly from a civil service perspective, the kind of things that I did within the civil service and how I moved things forward. As I say, from the point I joined the civil service up until probably beginning of 2017, I was very much leading and delivering on the issues pertaining to gender reassignment and intersex issues across the civil service. And that's how I ended up getting it. Somebody was kind enough to say a nice few words to me, get some supporting evidence based on a few other kind of things. And then that allowed me to have this little certificate above my head here. That's my partner's OBE. So
Wow.
we are a double honoured family on
Oh,
this side.
fabulous, fabulous to hear. So I'm just going to nearly the last two questions I promised you. As an older queer trans woman, how do you see life ahead? How, if you could shape the future, what does a truly dignified, respectful, affirming aging experience look like for the trans and non-binary people?
We as a community I go back to my point about 2 years in the mouth. We as a community need to start to listen more. We need to stop realizing that the world's against us. Yes, I know it feels it. I absolutely get that. 125% in 32.5 points. But we have to start listening. We have to go back to the point where we were prior to the this Sex Discrimination Act of 1999 regulations being updated with the gender reassignment regs. We also have to get back to the point where we absolutely understand the different kind of lived experiences. We have to explain the different points of the journey. We have to explain if we're fluid, whatever, all of those kind of things. And we have to stop seeing it and attacking our enemy from the extremes. Get into the trenches and realize, look, come on over, come and have a conversation. Come on, let's grab one of these and sit down and chat, because the one abiding memory I will always have of I think it was in 1989, when Sir Ian McKellen walked down Downing Street with his Mac on and his briefcase to sit down with the Prime Minister, which was John Major. I think it was John Major that was with the Prime Minister, and say, John, can we have a chat? Because The gay men community back in whatever year it was in crisis. HIV crisis was at its absolute peak. And we all remember the adverts of then when it was the gravestone and stuff like that. Don't die of ignorance is what they were claiming. And Ian sat down with the then Prime Minister and said, you know what? We need to find a way to work this problem together. And that's what I want for the trans community, to work together with government, even though it may feel like they're against us. Sometimes they may be against us because you're saying things as bad as what they're saying bad things. Find the middle ground, hold the olive branch out, and let's move forward together.
Excellent. One final question to you, Jacqui. What is that one thing that makes you get out of bed? And I know you said you want to make a difference, but there's that experience that you want to have. I want to know the experience that you wish you could have.
Just to be making a difference to every single person. That's the only way I can see it. Apart from a dog wanting to go for a wee, it's simply getting up and knowing that when I look in this computer, when I look outside in the world, when I hear the things that are being said in various different media outlets, when I look online or whatever, and go, we're still not there yet. We still need to realize that the world isn't broken. It's us as a people that need to find that common ground again, that olive branch to each other. Build the bridge, start building the bridge. A bridge will be built one brick at a time. And we need to realize that we are those bricks that will absolutely build the bridge to both sides of the divide.
Wow. I can see a very positive future. At least that's the intention that we put out there in the universe, right? And how do we contact you? If anybody wants to contact you and have a conversation, want to reach out for your D&I consultancy, would you be able to share, your details, and we can put it in the caption for sure?
I can absolutely share those details. So if people want to see any of my details, the main thing I use at the moment is LinkedIn as part of anything like that. But I'm happy to share all my details, all my contact details, if people want to get in touch with me directly. That's not a problem.
Because I really believe, Jacqui, that a lot of organizations and individuals will learn from your experience. And thank you, Jacqui. Thank you so much for sharing, for your honesty, for your courage, for these conversations like this remind us why aging, while trans, must be heard, seen, and understood. Ask questions, people. Feel free to write to us, comment, because it is important for us to ask questions. And I can guarantee you, even though I don't know Jacqui really well, I know her well enough, and from our conversation today, that Jacqui will respond with love and respect. So at Older Queer Voices, we hold these truths close, and we'll keep amplifying them loudly and with pride. So we have come to an end to yet another powerful and impactful conversation. Jacqui, thanks to you.
Namaste.
Namaste. And I'd like to thank our outreach partners who help us reach as many people as we can. Outspoken Speakers, My G Work, Proud HR, GFW Clothing, and Ageism is Never in Style. And of course, I cannot forget the wife, the Mrs. Nicola Fenton, the producer and co-curator, who really works behind the scenes to make this podcast possible. If you have any feedback, comments, or want to nominate yourself or someone you know to appear on this podcast, please email us and we'll send you a nomination form to get more information. Do share a link to this podcast. We need to amplify our voices, especially older queer voices. And Jacqui, once again, thank you very much. Thank you to our listeners. See you all again soon.
Bye all.